This morning, you probably turned a key, drove away at 40 miles an hour, and arrived at your destination without breaking a sweat. But rewind 100,000 years. That very same journey would have taken 2 full days on bare feet, across unforgiving landscapes where every step could have cost you your life. Today, the world fits comfortably within a single day's travel. We can reach almost anywhere with astonishing ease. But for most of human history, even the simplest journey could become your last. Every step forward was a gamble with your own survival. For 300,000 years, the human world stretched no farther than the distance our feet could carry us. That harsh limitation quietly shaped everything: where we built our homes, what we ate, who we chose to love, and even the farthest horizon we could ever hope to reach. So if walking was all humanity ever had, just how far could a single pair of feet carry an entire species? A cheetah can burst across the plains at 70 miles an hour. A horse can sustain 30 miles an hour for mile after mile. And humans? At our absolute limit, we can barely reach 15 miles an hour before exhaustion catches us. On paper, we lose every race. But don't let speed fool you. Our greatest advantage was never speed. Imagine walking 20 miles today, sleeping through the night, then doing it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, for weeks without end. That is the extraordinary endurance no other creature on Earth was built to match. Take a look at your own feet. Those graceful arches are more than bones. They function like finely tuned springs. Every time your foot strikes the ground, your Achilles tendon quietly stores energy before releasing it into the next step. At the back of your neck, a powerful ligament keeps your head remarkably steady while your legs work tirelessly below. And perhaps most remarkable of all, nearly 2 million sweat glands across your body work together to keep you cool and alert, long after larger animals have collapsed from overheating. Evolution never built us to win short sprints. It built us to become the ones who keep moving, long after everything else has stopped. In Tanzania, footprints preserved in volcanic ash for 3.6 million years tell an extraordinary story. They capture 2 of our ancient ancestors walking side by side, upright and confident. They are the oldest direct evidence that humanity had already mastered one of the most important milestones in its history, walking on 2 legs. Those tireless footsteps carried humanity farther than any species had gone before. They left the cradle of Africa, crossed the Middle East, spread across the vast landscapes of Asia, entered Europe, and eventually pushed deep into the frozen wilderness of Siberia. They crossed the land bridge into Alaska and continued steadily south through the length of the Americas, nearly 15,000 miles, traveled by people who had no maps, no certainty of what lay ahead, and no guarantee that a better land even existed. Which leaves us with one extraordinary question. Were they simply wandering, or did they somehow know where they were going? Archaeologists have uncovered obsidian stone tools hundreds of miles from the nearest volcano. Seashells have been found buried deep inland, while pieces of amber traveled across towering mountain ranges before finally coming to rest. None of this happened by accident. It reveals something remarkable. Our ancestors were not simply drifting through the world, they traveled with purpose, built trade networks, and maintained invisible connections with communities they had never even met face to face. These were never aimless wanderings. This was how our ancestors built humanity's first great network, one held together not by roads or machines, but by the endurance of human feet. Across that invisible web, knowledge never stopped moving. Information about hidden water sources, rich hunting grounds, the best stone for crafting razor-sharp blades, and the safest paths toward new lands passed from one community to another, no single person could ever have walked the entire 15,000-mile journey alone. It was a relay spanning thousands of generations, with each traveler carrying humanity just a little farther than the one before. On the island of Flores, archaeologists have discovered stone tools dating back 800,000 years. The mystery is that Flores has never been connected to the mainland, not even during the lowest sea levels of the ice ages. At least 12 miles of deep ocean have always separated it from the outside world. Yet somehow, someone crossed that water. Perhaps it all began with nothing more than chance. A fallen log swept away by floodwaters, a bundle of reeds someone instinctively clung to while crossing a rushing river, only to discover that it floated instead of sinking. No one ever designed the first boat. Someone simply held on long enough to realize it actually worked. But everything that followed was anything but an accident. Around 65,000 years ago, our ancestors undertook an extraordinary voyage. They deliberately crossed open ocean from Southeast Asia to Australia, a distant land they could neither see nor even know for certain existed. Somewhere in that endless sea, at a moment lost to history, someone stepped onto a shore no human had ever touched before. They had no idea that their quiet landing would become one of the greatest turning points in the story of our species. And if our ancestors were already capable of crossing oceans so long ago, then what would become possible once humanity truly chose to master the seas? Eventually, humanity reached Hawaii, Easter Island, New Zealand, and nearly every habitable island scattered across the vast Pacific Ocean. Imagine voyages stretching more than 2,500 miles across open water, with no maps, no compass, and not a single visible landmark to guide the way. Land had been conquered on foot. The sea had been conquered with simple boats. Yet in the middle of that endless ocean remained one final, merciless mystery that humanity had somehow learned to solve. There was no compass, no nautical chart, no coastline, waiting on the horizon. Yet to these master navigators, the ocean was never an empty void. Every swell arriving from a particular direction whispered that distant land was pushing back against the waves. Clouds that lingered motionless while all the others drifted revealed solid ground hidden beneath them. And at dawn, seabirds flying out across the water, only to return home before sunset painted an invisible map, leading them toward islands the human eye could not yet see. Now picture yourself there. A canoe gliding across an endless ocean, carrying food, livestock, and entire families whose lives depend on reaching the far shore. In every direction there is nothing but water. The only thing standing between survival and catastrophe is a single person, someone capable of reading the hidden signals woven into the sea itself, a language no one else aboard can understand. Calling that ability a superpower would hardly be an exaggeration. By now, humanity had crossed continents and mastered vast oceans. But one unforgiving limit still refused to yield. You could sail across thousands of miles of open sea, survive towering waves, and reach distant lands. Yet in the end, everything you brought home was still limited to what your own two arms could carry. So what do? When the thing you must carry weighs far more than your body can ever bear, a single person can walk dozens of miles without much trouble. But that same person cannot carry a 220-pound animal back to camp alone. For most of human history, the true limit of travel was never distance itself. The greatest obstacle was always the weight resting on your shoulders. There is something worth pausing to think about. Stone can survive for thousands of years, waiting patiently to be uncovered by archaeologists. But wood, animal hides, rope, and reeds, The very materials that built everyday life rarely endure. That leaves us with an unsettling possibility. Our picture of ancient technology may be deeply incomplete because it is stitched together from only the few fragments that time allowed to survive. Entire ages of brilliant transportation inventions may have once existed, only to quietly vanish without leaving a trace. Picture a remarkably simple design. Two wooden poles crossed into a V shape, with a platform suspended between them. Pull the narrow end, and the platform lifts the entire load behind you. With nothing more than this elegant invention, a single person could transport dozens of kilograms. Yet almost none of these carrying frames have survived for archaeologists to find. Which means the real question is, no longer? How many inventions did ancient humans create? It has become something far sadder. How many masterpieces of engineering have disappeared forever, simply because they were built from materials that could never outlast time? Eventually, even these simple carrying frames could no longer satisfy human ambition. So we made a leap that no other creature on Earth had ever dared to attempt. We brought another species directly into our transportation system. Dogs began pulling sleds loaded with heavy supplies across endless fields of snow. And perhaps it was this extraordinary partnership that quietly opened the first door toward humanity's greatest achievements. Before long, humanity found another companion, an animal capable of carrying far greater loads, one that would become the key to an entirely new chapter, forever changing the rhythm and the speed of history itself. Across the vast grasslands of what is now Kazakhstan, traces of that remarkable age still survive. Ancient horse jaws bear the distinctive wear marks left by bits. Even crude pottery preserves chemical traces of mare's milk once heated inside clay vessels. These people were no longer hunters chasing wild horses across the steppe. They had become horse riders, horse herders, and horse milkers. They had woven their lives together with these magnificent animals, redefining an entire way of living around them in the span of a single generation. The human world suddenly became 8 times smaller. Journeys that once consumed weeks could now be completed in only a few days. News traveled like the wind. Trade reached distant horizons. Even warfare was transformed. Mounted armies could appear outside a city's gates with such astonishing speed that defenders often realized the danger only when it was already upon them. Strange as it sounds, humanity had already crossed vast oceans tens of thousands of years before anyone even thought to invent the wheel. If the wheel was truly such an obvious invention, why did it take us so many ages before we finally began to use it? A wheel by itself solves almost nothing. In mud, dense forests, or rugged mountains, it is often less useful than a simple sled or the strength of a pack animal. A wheel only becomes truly powerful when it is part of something much larger, mounted on a sturdy axle, rolling across roads built for its purpose, and pulled by animals strong enough to harness its full potential. The true breakthrough was never the wooden circle itself. It was the birth of an entire system, a revolution that finally allowed humanity to conquer, organize, and master distance itself. And so that extraordinary journey can almost be told in a single breath. It began with our own feet carrying us across continents. Then came simple wooden rafts that broke the barrier of the open sea. Forgotten inventions, long erased by time, pushed humanity beyond the limits of the human body. We learned to borrow the strength of other species. And eventually, it was the horse that shattered every limit of speed. Finally, when roads and wheels came together, they formed a complete transportation system that transformed the world forever. It is almost ironic that we grow frustrated when the Wi-Fi connection drops during a 6-hour flight across 3,000 miles of ocean. Look back at your ancestors. They crossed entire continents on bare feet. walking through landscapes so untouched that many of them did not even have names. Not one of them set out with the ambition of conquering the world. They were simply travelers, quietly moving forward. Each generation walked just a little farther than the one before, driven by patience rather than glory. The greatest journey humanity has ever undertaken was never marked on any map, and no single traveler could ever have completed it alone. It was a journey carried across thousands of generations by people who shared one extraordinary trait. They simply refused to stop moving forward.